Hi, I'm John Tickles, and welcome to Remote RPGs featuring cowboys! Yeah, today we're gonna talk about Wild Arms, the original PS1 classic. And what's that, you say? No, seriously, I can't hear you. This is a video? I cannot converse with you. Seek help. Anyway, hypothetical critic, you ask, how is this game remote? Well, I debated it with a panel of myself, and looked around the internet, got sidetracked, and looked some more until I decided that Wild Arms is friggin' underrated. Even IGN agrees. I never hear anybody say it's bad or anything, but when people talk about the best RPGs, Wild Arms never comes up. People remember it as a good game, but do they remember it being this good? Well, let's review Wild Arms for the Sony PlayStation. Wild Arms was released in early 1997 by Mediavision, a company known, well, for the Wild Arms series, but they also did Beyond the Yellow Brick Road. The game is notable for being one of the first pre-Final Fantasy VII titles on the PS1, and for being an early Western-themed RPG. Yeah, cowboys. Who the hell could ignore the fact that this game is based off old westerns? That's friggin' awesome! The game takes place in a dying world called Filgaia. This is a kind of industrial revolutionist world where an ancient advanced civilization was wiped out, and a few remaining people in the world can find these relics of the past as they struggle for survival in a dying world. Yeah, so the game is really advertised as this awesome cowboy RPG, with the closest thing to that beforehand being, Live a Live. However, the game only really utilizes this setting earlier in the game, before it becomes more of a typical fantasy setting. And I found this a tad disappointing. They could have thrown a couple more references in there. Hell, they even throw space into the mix later on. I guess we know how Cowboys and Aliens was conceived. Oh, and wasn't Spike Spiegel a space cowboy? Oh, this game just gets better and better. Let's talk about the story. The game follows the struggle between a group of 3 people who travel across the dying planet to defeat the ancient demons who have reappeared in order to save the world from an apocalyptic force. Okay, not groundbreaking. Wild Arms certainly doesn't have the most creative story with the most twists. It's a traditional, pretty much 16-bit RPG story and game, complete with a few twists here or there. However, it's really carried by its characters. And speaking of which, you play as the silent protagonist, Rudy. It's funny because it's called the same thing. Anyway, Rudy is a young orphan teenager who travels the world as a lone drifter, ostracized by everyone he meets for his use of an ancient weapon called an arm. As strange as it is to say about a silent protagonist, Rudy actually has a lot of character. You see him through the lens of other characters, and I really like that pretty groundbreaking twist he gets about halfway through the game, but I shall not spoil. Jack is an older treasure hunter and swordsman for hire, and he's pretty likable and swashbuckling, with a nice and tragic backstory to boot. In terms of personality and such, I'm gonna go with Han Solo here. Your final character is Cecilia, a young magic user healer of the game, who's also a princess and the chosen one. Wow, guys, we hit about 3 tropes in one character, nice job! Seriously though, she's a pretty good character, being just the right combination of ditzy and warm-hearted. She has a pretty reasonable character arc too, learning to define herself apart from being a princess. And this is your trio. Your threesome? Your triple triads, if I may. Unless you go to the remake, Wild Arms Alter Code F. Anyway, you'll notice that none of them are really unique, but the cool thing about each character is that they each get a very good arc that they get to go through, and it's very fun to watch. I really like how you only have these 3 characters to focus on, as you really get a good feel for them as they grow on you throughout the story. They're just likable. Unlike other games, you won't have a protagonist whose ass you'd like to kick, and it also doesn't hurt that these 3 remind me a lot of Luke, Leia, and as I mentioned, Han Solo. There are a lot of other crazy characters, of course. The most notable ones that come to mind are Calamity Jane, the crazy gunslinging jailbait whose theme song is a complete rip-off! Rip-off! There's also the main villain, Mother. No, see, apparently that's Nintendo's main villain. Oh, I went there! Mother is this insane ancient evil who has this kind of Kefka-like insanity where she pretty much just wants to see everything in the world burn, and she loves that shit. Other than that, the characters and even the entire story of Wild Arms aren't groundbreaking, but it doesn't need to be. The main plot is a very simple affair with a few curveballs. But you also get a lot of really emotional moments and montages. And it's those good montages, like the opening to Suikoden 2, that help tell the story, and they just look great. Therefore, the story doesn't really get any complaints from me, since this was a game likely planned for a 16-bit console anyway, and what the hell's wrong with 16-bit? And since it's in that style, it works. If you count all the in-game books and such, the story is actually pretty deep, with themes of isolation, friendship, and hope pushing it through. It never tries to be more than it is. A simple, heartwarming tale about a determined trio beating the odds and saving the world. What more do you need? Yeah, good point. Faye Valentine would be nice. The gameplay of Wild Arms is where it really shines in my opinion, particularly in the navigation and puzzles. The game takes a chapter from Zelda, with lots of item-based navigation and exploration puzzles, but in that vein, these puzzles are a lot of fun in how action-based they are. They get really creative with the dungeon design and such, and what's even better is the difficulty of these puzzles. Maybe 1 or 2 puzzles will have you checking a walkthrough, but other than that, they have a really balanced difficulty. The exploration is really fun too, with this giant world to explore, many towns to scavenge through, and of course, random baddies to fight. Let's check out that sweet battle system! Oh
my God! What's wrong with your face? What's wrong with your face?
I need a second. Show me something awesome. Okay, I'll pretend I didn't see that until we talk graphics. The battle system in Wild Arms is pretty good standard 16-bit greatness. There are a couple things I really have to point out that make it different. Each of the character has their own special skills and roles. Strangely, Rudy is your only gunfighter, who gets new arms. Jack is the swordsmaster who gets new techniques, and Cecilia is your typical magic user who gets new spells. Moreover, each character gets a force bar that they can fill up for special moves. but you really have to learn to use the Force correctly.
Use the Force, Luke.
However, I do have two small issues with the battle system. First, it's pretty limited. With only 3 playable characters, you can't really switch them out, and each have their own inherent skills. You can't change too much around, so it's not a lot of customization. Secondly, it's a pretty easy game if you stick to the patented weaken the enemy and then attack with your buff party members tactic. I don't really recall losing more than a couple of fights, but I guess this really does make you feel as invincible as the man with no name. They were really enjoyable, nevertheless. The graphics in the game are pretty impressive for early PlayStation 1. I think these character models look infinitely better than the ones in Final Fantasy VII, as the overworld graphics are all colorful and varied. As I've mentioned, the battle graphics are a lot worse. They seriously look like just the sprites from the Final Fantasy VI You know what? No, not even close. At least they had whites in their eye. These are just dots. Ugh. The battle animations were pretty cool and the enemy design was pretty interesting, but that doesn't make up for these abominations. Still, when the game does 2D, it does it very well, and shows that a new console can still profit from old tricks. The music of Wild Arms. The beautiful music of Wild Arms. This is one of my favorite video game soundtracks of all time, hands down. This was done by Michiko Naruke, whose work has only been notably the Wild Arms series and again Beyond the Yellow Brick Road. The music in this game is phenomenal! Those catchy as hell town themes, sweeping orchestral lamentations, the triumphant trumpet pieces, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Okay, one more point about the soundtrack. That opening theme, Into the Wilderness, incredible. There are some songs on my iPod that I have to stop and listen to every time they come on, regardless of whether I'm sitting at a bus stop or in the middle of traffic court. They include Morphogenetic Sorrow, Scars of Time, and this song. That is all. Genius! All in all, Wild Arms is a game that more people need to experience if they just want a simple, classic, fun RPG. The fantastic world with a simple plot, memorable and interesting characters, a good battle system, incredible exploration, and a fantastic score are all reasons you should pick up this game via the PlayStation Network for cheap, or buy the actual copy, or hell, even the PS2 remake. It's the first and perhaps best in the 5-game series, and it has friggin' cowboys and space. You won't have any snakes in your boots about that. Okay, I think that completes the stupid cowboy jokes list. Yes, it does! Okay, that's all I gotta say. So, until our next random encounter, I'll see you later, Space Cowboy.
Oh my God! What's wrong with your face?